ON Radio.
Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What is a ghost? How do we tell if an entity is naughty or nice? Is everything we know wrong?
Hello and welcome to the 1010th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, and on YouTube. I'm Ben, and that was Paul, and today we bring you a new guest on a hot topic. So Joshua Chairs is a musician, paranormal investigator, publicist, researcher, and writer. He needs more accolades. He needs more. Joshua's interests in the paranormal began at an early age while watching Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, a classic. Joshua is a 2008 graduate of the Westchester University.
In Pennsylvania.
Yes, and a future graduate student majoring in business administration. In 2020, Joshua founded Phantom Detectives LLC to help people who were going through paranormal experiences using the Paranormal Research Society blueprint in order to help people who are going through things they can't scientifically explain. In 2021, Phantom Detectives LLC purchased the rights to the late Art Bell's former affiliate director's news program, I should say, Dark Matter News. His websites, phantomdetectives.org, darkmatternews.com, erc2explore.com, and all sorts of other wonderful things. So Joshua Chairs, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. I look forward to coming in from, and also from your listeners.
Well, hey, so I guess we can just hop right into it here. So what makes Phantom Detectives different from the thousands of other ghost hunting organizations or groups that say they want to help people improve the existence of the afterlife, etc.?
Phantom Detective is much different than every other organization because not only we have connections to the late Art Bell via Dark Matter program that Leo Ashcraft ran for them, but also because we have some of the most state-of-the-art equipment in the world that most teams, 90% of the teams, don't have, such as lighted dowsing rods, various EMF meters, also the new SLS cameras with 3D mapping. We also use, state-of-the-art ghost boxes, DVRs. I mean, we really have some of the state-of-the-art equipment. So that's one thing that differentiates ourselves from other paranormal investigation teams is the equipment aspect. We also we also have a UFO organization from our lead investigator, director, and client relations, Rick. He is certified through MUFON. He used to be a part of MUFON in Delaware and then started his own UFO organization. So we have that. We cover the UFOs with his organization. We also have our psychic medium, Melissa Ferrazzano. Melissa, of course, is a student of Cindy Kaye's from the Holzer file, so we got the mediumship end covered. And we also have the historical research, which is my area of expertise. And we're the only team in the world that has the psychic lawyer also on our team as a researcher, the world-famous Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer. He's on our team. And, of course, we have various, other, avenues such as, connections to some of the legendary hosts and different things. So we're definitely having a lot of various platforms that we can continue to improve and grow. So I think from the historical research to the equipment to the mediums that we have on our team, we definitely differentiate ourselves from other teams out there.
What do we mean by haunted?
Haunted, basically, there's like so many different ways. There's 4 types of hauntings that people can normally classify themselves. The first one is intelligent hauntings, which are, things that directly interact with the living, such as, say, for example, if you're hearing footsteps or you're hearing noises of doors closing on their own. That is one type of haunting, just something that directly interacts with the living. There's also residual haunting, which my friends from Rhode Island, of course, which are the Atlantic Paranormal Society, right local to you guys up in Warwick, Jason Haas and Grant Wilson, longtime friends of mine, they actually defined the residual haunting as a tape recorder that plays itself over and over again. like a record that's spinning around. That is one kind of haunting, residual haunting. There's also the other kind of haunting, which is the demonic haunting. Phantom Detectives defines demonic hauntings as any kind of negative entity that preys on the living. I've seen cases where people will get scratched. I've seen cases where people often would get lifted up out of bed, all kinds of other things. So there's definitely a lot of demonic entities out there. And then, of course, there's poltergeist, which is noisy ghosts. Poltergeist hauntings are normally defined as levitating plants and moving stuff around. So those are the four kind of hauntings that that are currently out there: intelligent, residual, demonic, and poltergeist.
Now this Paranormal Research Society, that's Ryan Buell's group?
Yes, and funny thing you mentioned with Ryan Buell. We actually have a couple connections to him. First thing is we actually got his old tri-field EMF meter, the old needle nose tri-field. Actually was given to me by a friend. We just acquired that in May, so we actually have Ryan Buell's old tri-field EMF meter. And what's awesome is Phantom Detectives just launched on our website, phantomdetectives.org. We're going to be setting up a new occult symbols, also spirituality department, which is actually going to be ran by, her name's Holly Faust. Holly, of course, worked with Paranormal Research Society. She was Elfie Music's assistant, and she's going to be joining us now, working with us remotely on spirituality and occult research and occult symbols. Fantastic guest. So we actually have one of the former PRS members working now with Phantom Detectives, along with his former EMF meters. And here's a funny connection. My best friend, Gwen for Lizzie, went to college with Katrina Wyman, who's pretty famous, on Paranormal State. She's been on Portals to Hell, also Paranormal Lockdown. She went to school with her, and also Heather Taddy, who Heather, of course, is very close to my best friend, Gwen. So I have a direct connection to PRS, and they've been a huge influence on me of how I'm going to try to build this thing from the ground up here in Pennsylvania, but kind of expand upon it and make it my own version of it.
So this is going to sound like a weird question. What is spirituality?
Spirituality is defined as like a belief in something, like basically connecting with yourself and also connecting with your loved ones. And there are different ways that you can basically find spirituality. So one thing that we've always been very amazed of how spirituality works. There are all kinds of ways. There's religious dimensions that people can do. So there are dimensions of spirituality. First is the emotional dimension, which is like that's basically how you feel about a particular situation. If you're happy, are you sad? Are you angry? There's also the physical dimension, which means you can touch, taste, and feel a particular object, like one of your five senses. There's also the intellectual one, which basically is using your intelligence to help achieve something and also to help process things correctly. And there's also occupation, which means you use a job that you may have to help shape your religious beliefs, such as being a pastor at a church, or a deacon or a leader. And the last dimension, of course, is the social dimension, which means how you interact with others, network, and use your religious beliefs to help shape who you are.
I don't disagree. I'm gonna ask you another fun question here, because I'm 90% sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I understand where you're coming from. And yes. My question has to do with scientific materialism. Do you find that as a paranormal investigator, you have a hard time separating a scientific materialist version of yourself versus a spiritualist version of yourself?
Absolutely. I think that especially the best way to do that, of course, we actually in Phantom Detectives use the scientific method, which is, of course, observe, create a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and develop it, and then see if you gather a lot of results based upon that hypothesis. So that's why we use the paranormal equipment and set it up in the active area in locations that we are investigating to see if we can try to figure out, okay, is this, for example, this client is actually seeing this door fly open by itself. is there some kind of scientific explanation doing that, such as maybe the door is deadbolted, maybe there's wind pushing in, is there some kind of draft coming in for ventilation? So much like ghost hunters, we try to debunk things that are in the environment. Maybe, like, for example, a person is hallucinating, seeing a ghost in their kitchen, but yet there's a lot of kitchen appliances in there that are causing high EMF fields. So we use EMF meters to try to, near the appliances to see if there's any kind of rationale that can be explained from that. So usually, if you're trying to using kind of debunking things, but then if you can somehow, have some kind of personal experience happening during the investigation, you can validate the client's claims. That's pretty big, but it's also important that you got to separate that from your spiritual side, because I'm born again Christian and religious, but also I don't believe every client's claims of activity unless I experience it for myself. So you have to kind of have a barrier. You got to kind of keep those two separate entities, like when you're on the investigation, then when you're off the investigation. It's kind of keeping them both kind of connected together on a bridge. Like they connect, but they're two totally opposite ends.
Oh, please, Dad.
Well, no, so like Ryan Buell's, your base theories are very traditional.
Yeah.
Why do you still think ghosts are dead people?
Well, I think ghosts are dead people because there are so many people out there that have loved ones that have passed on. So many people like Dr. Raymond Moody, who has created a whole entire thing about people that are believing in life after death. And of course, he's created entire, decades of research about this subject. One of the most fascinating guys in the world for near-death experiences. So I believe people are loved ones, and also those who have passed away are actually still with us. So I think there's a lot of people seeing near-death experiences and also feeling things. And there's also, of course, the psychic end of it, where people are using readings. I think that a lot of times spirits can communicate through psychics and mediums, and maybe not always like they're 100% accurate, but there are people out there that have a sixth sense where they can pick up things that most normally no other people wouldn't. For example, our psychic medium Melissa, who's not here today, but she is been taught by Cindy Kaza from the Holzer files, who studied under one of the top mediums in the world. I believe Cindy's mentor, of course, was a pretty world-renowned psychic himself. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can feel things in the environment. And I think these spirits, they're around us. We may not see them there, but they're physically there, but they're there spiritually. And sometimes we might feel like, an impression. We might feel like some kind of sign, maybe a particular smell. We're using our five senses and also our sixth sense, which is our psychic opinion, to shape, what's around us. So these spirits are all around us. We just got to see them and feel them. But I think we've captured evidence from all of our investigations that would make a lot of people into believers. Like, we have a video of a door flying open by itself at this mill, which we have no reasonable explanation for. It's bolted shut. We're the only ones on the property. How did that happen?
That's a really good point, because that leads right into my next question. Now, I'm not trying to sound insulting, but
right.
How's that going? Who are you trying to prove this to, and how is it going?
I think I'm trying to prove this to myself, because I come from a skeptic perspective, meaning I don't believe all the client claims, but also at the same time I'm open that there is a spiritual dimension. So I'm kind of more in it to go out there and capture this activity for our clients and all these homes and businesses, to be able to prove to myself that there is something out there. Because a skeptic point of view basically means you don't accept the beliefs or the beliefs of the client, but it's also you're open to the idea of the afterlife, but also you need to have it scientifically proven. You need to feel it or experience something, such as capturing an EVP, or something like that. So I think it's more for trying to prove to myself, and of course my team members would probably say the same things with themselves. They want to prove that what they are experiencing and feeling, and with using the equipment to capture evidence, is we're trying to prove to ourselves that there is an afterlife, and there is people out there that are haunting these homes and businesses, and some of them are trapped there. Maybe they need to be maybe we need to, such as smudging. We have a negative entity. We might need to get rid of it using smudge and sage. So for me, it's about proving it to ourselves most of all, and then of course try to using the evidence that we've gathered to draw a hypothesis and correlate that and see if there's any positive relationship between the evidence that we capture and our personal beliefs.
So that there's you've used the word experience a number of times throughout our conversation so far. How important is the experience to all of this?
I would say experience is one of the most important things because doing an investigation requires a lot of work. You have to be able to, of course, you got to contact the location or they got to contact you. And now the beautiful thing is right on our website, phantomdetectives.org, if people are having, feelings that there's something going on, they can just hit the request help tab and it goes right to darkmatternews.com. So now people can just fill out the form with all the information, then it goes to Melissa, and then Melissa, of course, who is like the case manager as well, she'll get the information and she'll give it to Rick and myself in the group text, and we'll talk about the investigation. So experience is very important because we've gotten better and better and better with every investigation. Like when we first started, we were kind of like all scattered all over the place. Like one person will go here, one person will go here. But now, like we work as a unit, we're very much like, one group and one entity. So what we try to do is we work together the entire night, like from the setup. Then you got to factor in the amount of time that it takes. You have to set up all the equipment. A couple of years ago, we weren't very experienced, but now we know exactly where to set up the DVRs. We know exactly where to set up the REM pods, the K2 meters, the voice recorder. So it really just comes down to the more that you do something and the more that you continue to practice, the better you're going to get. And eventually you'll create your own kind of uniform system of investigating that makes you stand out from other different paranormal investigation teams.
So there's a really interesting idea that the Greeks had, because they had many different words for many different things. Everyone knows the whole love garbage thing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about knowledge, right? How one interacts with how one thinks, the thoughts, etc. And there's different ways in which we deal with things, right? You don't talk to a person who's having who's having a really hard time like you're treating it like a car manual or doing a math problem, right? You think in different ways and how one deals with it. So they had words like techne, which was like technical knowledge, episteme, which was scientific knowledge, and an oddly very important one was doxa, which is essentially the knowledge of public opinion, right? And there's a very interesting distinction between all of these different things, right? So you can get all the data you want, but at the end of the day, you need to use something to interpret it, which would be personal experience or public opinion, right?
Yeah.
So by using technology, right, you're trying to achieve things by measuring the environment, trying to capture bits and bobs and pieces, and in the end, you still need to interpret them. Now, do you find that there's an issue with the interpretation?
Oh, definitely. I think there's a lot of times, because especially factor in electronic voice phenomena or EVPs, like on quite a few times, like, we would clean it up in Audacity and then we would upload it and then like put it on our website. And when people would go to the website to visit, there's going to be different people, like, such as like one person might think the word, like, for example, one EVP we captured last year on this light ship called the Light Ship Overfalls in Lewis, Delaware. We actually got this EVP that was clear. It said, "Hello, help me," in this woman's voice. And there was nobody on the ship. There was nobody outside that could have said that. So, but then like we had another EVP that basically said, right here with a whisper. And one person thought it said, "I'm near," instead of right here. So a lot of times with public opinion, EVPs are, broken. You might get words and fragments out of an audio. So one person might interpret that electronic voice phenomena versus another person. So sometimes you have to really listen to understand what the spirits are saying to you. Or, for example, if you're using like a thermal camera, which is point and click, you just use like that, a thermal imaging camera, you might get like an image that you might think is actually like a spirit. But then you find out you got to make sure there's no like hot and cold signatures. You got to make sure that there's no drafts coming in. And also you got to make sure that if it's hot, if it's a cat on the floor or a dog, you got to look out for that stuff. And also the SLS camera, we also use that, which is the structured light sensor camera. It creates stick figures on the screen. You got to make sure that you don't have any objects near the SLS camera, such as a water bottle or a chandelier hanging from a wall, because it'll falsely map it and you'll get a false reading. So you have to be kind of very careful. We do a great job of understanding how to use the equipment and where to use it at. That's something that just comes with experience, that teams You have to just go out there and learn like exactly how the equipment works, and understand where the best place to use that equipment is.
EVPs standing for electronic voice phenomena.
Yeah.
Now, Joshua, what would you say to the physicists who have told us that the classical notion of a spirit containing full personality, etc., is not possible under the laws of thermodynamics? How does that work?
Well, the laws of there's of course there's different things like Michio Kaku's string theory. There's all these different scientific theories, and how something that one thing I love with Mark Anthony, our psychic lawyer, he came up with this fantastic book called The Afterlife Frequency, where basically he talks about the electromagnetic soul, which is energy. All those scientists out there, energy is there's a law of energy, which states that energy cannot can be created nor destroyed, but move from one form to another. So when we die, I think the biggest problem with science is that it doesn't really mention the law of energy. Why can't, as we die, our souls go into like a pond? And Mark Anthony defines this very well in The Afterlife Frequency as like you throw a stone in the water and you create a ripple effect. Why can't there be ripples of echoes of time that are in an environment? And I think scientists do a great job of understanding this, but to prove people that there's an afterlife, unless they actually physically experience it for themselves, like scientists are always going to say, well, that's not true, or there's no such thing as ghosts or hauntings. So the best thing that we can do is just present the evidence that we've gotten on our investigations, and let them draw their own conclusions. And even if they say, hey, this is nothing but more than just a figment of your imagination, but there's going to be other people out there that might be open to that idea. So all we can do is just present the data that we have, and correlate it, and see if there's we can continue to refine test our hypothesis, develop it, and see if we can come up with good results. And I think that's about the best thing we can do with those people who are not really belief in afterlife, such as telling an atheist, hey, there's no such thing as ghosts, but have you been to a paranormal investigation and actually experienced it? You gotta go and find out. The only way you're going to do something unless they find out for themselves.
Here's a question. It may seem out of nowhere, but it's important. What is a body?
Well, a body, of course, is a physical, something that's physical, that's moving, that's living. So our bodies are made of various organs. We've got a skeleton, muscular group, circulatory system. It has a heart. We all have a heartbeat. We're all functioning. We're all moving around. We're all physical people. We were born into this world. Of course, we all eventually someday pass away. So a body is a physical form that moves and interacts with people. That's how we define it. Is someone that is directly interacting with each other. Like we all have our own personalities. We all have our own particular tastes and styles, and we all have our own senses. So a body is basically a physical manifestation of ourselves.
A Platonist. So here's a well, we're coming up on our break, so I won't hit you with anything too crazy. It is a crazy question. What is the soul?
The soul is basically, it's an echo of time. It's a form that we all have passed on. We all, it's a physical, it's a once representation of ourselves that is projected onto the living, meaning like it's an echo of the past. It is a part of something that might have been one time, such as like I said, that electromagnetic soul, that law of energy. So if it's moving around, that energy is still within that environment. So these basically our energy forms are just moving around and creating balls of light in the soul. So the soul, in my opinion, is a part of a human that once was living, but now is passed on, and now maybe still haunting a home or a business and needs to get direction. So in my opinion, our souls are, there's been so many beliefs that people even the Egyptians way back in the early days believed in the afterlife, and of course, sarcophaguses and wrapping up their kings like King Tut in the tombs, and then that way they can be set for the there was so many different beliefs with the Egyptians, like Anubis and God of the Dead. So there's so many ways to interpret the soul. It just depends on which religion and how you look at it.
Hey, yeah, I'd say so, in some sense of the word. But there was one thing that all ancient people kind of had, which was their cosmology, was very different than ours today, and how they viewed the world and themselves in it. But we don't have time for that now. But I think we should probably hop to our break before we hop into another question here. So you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, with our wonderful guest Joshua Chairs, and we will continue this conversation right after this.
Hi, this is Joanne Borsier Hebert, calling for all classmates of Woonsocket High School class of 1978. Come help us celebrate our 45th reunion at Bella's Restaurant in Glendale, Friday, September 15th from 5 to 10. Looking forward to sharing memories of our past and creating new ones. Please call Linda Barad Senico at 401-766-3134 for more information. We also have a Facebook page, Woonsocket High Class of 1978, to find out more information also. Hope to see you there.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, here in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. It's a nice, warm August day here, and it's very, very, as you can see from our traffic cam here, it is a wonderful day here on Park Ave and Kennedy Street. And we have with us our wonderful guest Joshua Chairs, and we are discussing the big questions. What are ghosts? What are souls? What are bodies? How does it all work? You know, what do we do after we die? Who knows? But we'll get there when we get there, I suppose. And I guess, Joshua, we can hop right back into this. I'm a little perplexed. Only because I've seen the tried and true method of our friends at TAPS and all sorts of other things, and
Right.
they're doing the same things over and over and over and over again, and you know it's we not to disrespect. I find that we are addressing a problem using methods that don't quite address it. So here's the deal, right? So we're using scientific materialism to address something that is not scientifically material, right? You know, we're trying to use technology to capture and control the environment, and
Yes.
in a sense, it works, kind of. But I'm confused only because we live dual lives, right? You know, we are good scientific materialists until we can't be.
Right.
You know, in this instance, right? Let's say somebody's healed by looking at a statue of the Virgin Mary or something, and we say, "Wow, a miracle!" And then, you know, a Buddhist halfway across the world, you know, does something similar, and we say, "There's a scientific explanation for it." And we
Right.
live these dual lives, and the problem is that we as a society are so fractal in this, you know, and that's just a macrocosm of the micro, and it's the same thing here. You know, we have these dueling ideals that are pushing and fighting against each other,
Right.
and really the problem is the subject-object problem. You know, there's a subjective person or a subject that is experiencing an objective reality, but we are remiss in experiencing that object. And so the big question is this: do you think that the future of paranormal research is more technology, less technology, or is it really a phenomenological problem, how we experience it and how we understand it?
I think it's more of a phenomenological problem, because basically, yeah, as the technology can advance and we might get like some kind of state of the art, like, you know, a thing that can pick up some like motion sensor in all 360 degrees. I think it's just everyone's going to interpret like it all differently, you know. So I think that, you know, every person that's claiming there's a haunting in a home or business, it all depends. Like, are you feeling that there's your visitations from the other side? Are you having visitations from, you know, an extraterrestrial or a Bigfoot? So it really all depends, because it's all going to differ from person to person, because each person might be experiencing or feeling something different, you know. So it's going to be very hard to be able to, you know, the technology is wonderful, but it's actually more used to aid to the investigation than it is to actually, you know, it's more of like it's a companion, you know, it's a tool that we can use to try to, try to, see what's going on in the humidity. Is the humidity changing, the temperature changing? You know, is there something, you know, are we using these REM pods and these state-of-the-art devices? The technology should be used only as a companion to what we're experiencing. So if we can try to use the technology and we can try to, capture evidence with the technology, that's only something else. And if the mediums are also picking up on things and impressions and all that, and you can use that in companion, the technology should only be used to technically use it as a device. It's basically it's like working like an orchestra. You have each part of the orchestra that's conducting the symphony, and the technology is exactly just one part of that piece of the puzzle.
Okay, Joshua, by the mid-1970s, and I started out in the early 70s with the same belief system. Most people still have the same belief system. I was very confused because I was running into ghosts of people who hadn't died yet, and doppelgangers, ghosts of places, the same ghost being seen in multiple places at the same time. How would you explain that if the dead people theory is correct?
If the dead people theory is correct, I believe there are portals. So why can't spirits move around from place to place? I mean, they're coming in and out of places. So factor in water. Water's a conduit. So if spirits can move from one place to another, via they might appear as orbs, they might appear as smoke. My overall impression is spirits are all around us. We don't physically see them, but there are definitely spirits that are here with us. We just need to be able to experience it. But like I said, it's very hard to understand if there's a little girl spirit, or is there a little boy, or is there an older gentleman, or some angry negative entity. I believe these spirits can move around in different forms and show themselves to us in different ways, such as maybe we might have a particular smell. We might hear footsteps. So I believe that spirits can move to and from locations at will, all based on who is calling from, what kind of person is asking, hey, would you be able to, when you scan your ghost box, you also got to be very careful too when running an AM and FM sweep, because you got to factor in when you're running the ghost box, you might get a lot of radio stations, you might get 4 or 5 spirits, and they might come in and out. And of course, Gary Gawker, who's pretty amazing, he's created the Mel meter, which of course, picks up electromagnetic fields and temperature. So the best thing that we can just try to do as paranormal investigator is just try to do the historical research, see if there's any kind of past events on the property that happened, any kind of tragedies, or why these ghosts might still be here. Try to set up the equipment, conduct the hypothesis, test it, and refine it as best to our ability. And of course, write a case report based on what we have experienced. So there's a lot that we can try to do to help our clients, and that's the most important thing, is to try to make sure that they're comforted in their homes and businesses worldwide by doing exactly what we're doing, just doing the work and letting the work speak for itself.
What about the ghosts of people who haven't died yet?
The ghosts of people who haven't died yet. That is a good question. So I think the best thing that you can probably do for those who haven't died yet is you just got to understand what can you do physically to help them. Maybe move on. Maybe you can do a particular prayer, or you can try to, do some kind of, religious ritual that might help. There are different things that you can try to do depending on exactly what the situation is.
Good, Ben.
You presented me with another good question, and I was just about to ask you something completely different. What do we mean by help?
Help means to assist and help move the spirit from one place to another. Meaning, if, say, for example, there's some spirit that's been trapped there for 100 years, like some older gentleman who once talked there back in the 1800s, and their spirit's still there. You want to try to be able to help them cross over, and the way that you can do that is by saying, hey, you no longer need to be in this home anymore. We want to help you cross over to the other side. Your family is waiting in heaven for you. So sometimes what you can do by help is we can help them transition. I think that's a good analogy, is to help them get them out of that. If they're a spirit that, say, example, they died tragically in a car accident, their spirit's still haunting the scene of that accident. We want to be able to help them transition from where they're at here on Earth in the physical dimension, and get them over to where they need to be in the spiritual dimension, either heaven or hell. So the best thing that we can do is try to understand, their story, why they're still haunting, and try to help them move, transition from one place to another using some of the techniques and things that we've been taught.
Well, you may be right, but what if you're not? In our experience, the light that mediums will send people to is simply the electromagnetic boundary of a parallel world, of which, according to physics, there are billions and billions in all possible outcomes. What if you're sending them to a hell world and you're assuming that there's one quote-unquote spirit world, and there might not be?
Right. You got to be very careful of, like, when you basically cleanse a house, you want to make sure that you don't send anything there that is, like, you know, for example, with the little kid, you don't want to send them over to that dimension. So the best thing that you can try to do is just try to understand, like, you know, who's haunting the home or business. Try to, you know, use some of the techniques that you can, but also you just have to be very careful about, like, how you say it and how you prepare it, you know. And there's, of course, there's different kind of rituals, like from, you know, shamanism and, you know, Buddhism and different things that, you know, people use to help move spirits over. So that's why I'm kind of glad we do have a shaman that is available to assist us with different, like, techniques that they can use to help these spirits move from one place to another, and they can do it safely without, like, affecting them, you know, sending the wrong ones over. So I think it's good to have people like shamans that can, you know, that have some certain techniques that they can use on our investigations. They're usually just a phone call away. So we have a couple of them on the team that are just kind of like advisors to us. So when we need them, we can just call and say, hey, what kind of techniques would you recommend helping move this spirit over and have them cross over to the correct dimension? Yeah.
So here's a question, because inevitably we're going to get into eschatology. What is heaven and what is hell?
Right. In my opinion, heaven is, you know, it's like, you know, I like to say it is a paradise. It's like, you know, I think the Bible, of course, we can look at the Bible as a way to define what heaven is. It's a common religious, cosmological, it's a supernatural place where deities, angels, saints, you know, it's a belief, and it's basically more than what we could understand. It is like it has light. It's described as the highest place, the holiest place. It's like a paradise in contrast to hell or the underworld, which is, you know, so think of heaven as like a high place where there's like holiness, there's, you know, light, there's virtues, there's right beliefs, simply divine will. But then there's hell, which is like, you know, what they say, I think the original name of it was called Hades. It was a afterlife in which souls are subjected to punitive suffering, most often through torture as an external punishment after death. And, you know, of course, there's different ways that, you know, Christianity and Islam both interpret them, you know, of course, with reincarnation, also with, you know, there's also different styles of, you know, my opinion. But, you know, we also describe it like as an underworld, like where basically, depending on how that person died, did the person murder and kill somebody? And that's why they're, you know, their spirit now is in hell. So I think there's definitely a lot of different ways to interpret it. I think as heaven is like the holiness, the most highest place, and then you have the underworld. And of course, you know, in the Bible, there's even stories of, you know, angels, of course, which were once, you know, of course, Lucifer was once up in heaven. And as we know from, you know, the story of Lucifer in the Bible, where he, of course, became Satan, he was like he was the head of music. He was the most beautiful angel of all, but then he was jealous of God.
Well, nowhere in the Bible does it say that Satan and Lucifer are the same thing. Doesn't say it anywhere.
Right, but depending on the religion, like how you interpret that, you know.
That's Paradise Lost. That's, you know, that was a book written by a Protestant minister. It's not actual. It doesn't really say that anywhere. I just want to make that distinction, because it's important because time matters, right? Time matters, and the way that time functioned, especially in the old days, right? It was fluid. It was a part of. There's no layers, right? So I blame our 19th century German friends because they decided to say, well, you know, history is a science, and that's not true. History is not a science. Even Aristotle will tell you that you cannot know the essence of events, right? That's a very important distinction. So we weren't there. We don't know. You know, all we know is how time and all these events functioned for our ancient ancestors.
Right.
It was all layers of reality that were happening at the same time. You know, well, when did Satan fall from heaven? It doesn't matter, because it's happening now. It happened then. It continues to happen, right? You know, any you know, if you ever go to, I don't know, let's say mass, right? You know, they say or whatever, any sort of liturgical service, you know, in any sort of Christian denomination, it'll, well, old high church, if you want to get real specific about it. It's today is the day that we commemorate X and etc. And it's like today is the day that this happened, and it's because time doesn't matter, right? So
Right.
Anyway, with that being said, if time doesn't exist, then why does knowing the history about a place or event matter?
Well, because especially having historical research, like what it does is, like we want to try to understand why is historical research important? Because we want to be able to understand the history of a place. We want to be able to understand why is like what different places, like what's all happened in the history of these locations. Is there any kind of like amazing, what kind of notable families live there? What type of work did they do when living on the property? What kind, did they have any pets? Was it a farm? Was it like a historical? Was it like an asylum for people that were in need? So understanding the history can help us understand like if there's anything that is still there, because a lot of times these spirits like might be trapped there and they might be looking for help. I mean, I could name so many places right in Pennsylvania that are so haunted that these spirits are still there. Look at Eastern State Penitentiary and Fort Mifflin and Gettysburg and and Pennhurst, and a lot of these spirits still might be like tormented. They might not have passed on. So it's very important to have a good knowledge of the history, because then if you need to like give, like, for example, we're doing paranormal tours, like which we're planning on starting next year. Like we're going to walk people through the different locations and show them where things have happened. It helps you understand like the past and what you can do, what you can learn from it, and learn from how things happen, so things in the future can be prevented at these different locations. So we often look. I often heard a quote that I once heard: that those who fail to remember the past are often doomed to repeat it. So we can try to learn from it so things don't happen again. So I think that's why it's very important to have good knowledge of historical information about places.
Yeah, unfortunately, the past always repeats itself because that's how humans are. We exist in patterns. And we exist in ways that have been patterned by our ancestors, so nothing ever really changes. The only thing that changes is, having iPhones and stuff. And even then, it's not super duper different. The idea of using technology to control the world around us has always been a thing, and that's a topic for a different day. But in the meantime, we're closing up on the end of the show pretty quickly. So before we get into anything else, Joshua, tell us about your websites where people can find out more about you and anything else you got going on.
Sure. So the first thing I'm very excited to announce is that we do have paranormal investigator courses that we're offering our Patreon and Udemy subscribers. People can go to our Patreon and account, which has all of our investigation videos, evidence that we've captured. We're even teaching people how to take paranormal investigator classes and master classes. We have different tiers to this where we can offer our subscribers. That can be found at patreon.com, all one word, patreon.com /Phantom Detectives. So patreon.com and the last word, Phantom Detectives, like the t-shirt. That's where you can find us if you want to subscribe and check out our investigations and all the wonderful things that we're offering on those accounts. And we even are integrating the original Dark Matter News files that Leo did for art into our Patreon account. So that's one thing. Our team website, which is all one word, phantomdetectives.org. So phantomdetectives.org. We just launched a new case form so people can request help that need us. We also just went ahead and set up a new occult spirituality department, which our friend Holly Foss who worked with Paranormal State. She's going to be heading that up. That page is now available. And also people can go to darkmatternews.com, which of course belong to Leo Ashcraft, and we purchased the rights to Art Bell's Affiliate Directors News Program. We continue it to keep Art's memory alive. That's all one word, darkmatternews.com. To reach Melissa, our psychic medium, who is also our case manager, she can be reached at all one word, psychicmediumautumn.com. That's psychicmediumautumn.com. And if you want to look her up on Facebook, you can like her page at Psychic Medium Autumn Melissa. So it's all one word, Psychic Medium Autumn Melissa. And Rick, if you have any of your listeners have any UFO research, they would like a case to be investigated, they report seeing any kind of lights in the sky or any kind of strange phenomenon in the sky, you can reach Mr. Warner, who runs his own UFO organization, at ERC, the number 2, explore.com. That's ERC2explore.com. And you can also, if you would like to reach the world-renowned psychic lawyer, Mark Anthony, Psychic Explorer, he can be reached at all one word, Afterlife afterlifefrequency.com. That's afterlifefrequency.com.
Okay, I see that you are an LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. Do you charge people for services?
Right now, we're not going to be charging anybody because, to me, like the only thing now, if we have to drive somewhere to do an investigation, like we always say in the paranormal field, we never charge. But now, say, for example, someone needs an investigation done in Kentucky and we're up in Pennsylvania and we have to drive there, we might charge like, hotel and gas fees just because we're donating our time, we're bringing our equipment to the locations. We never try to charge as much as possible because I know a lot of people frown down upon it in the field. But we, if we have to travel somewhere, we might ask for just common things that help with the expense part, of running, our business. And of course, we're going to be in the next year. We're hoping to start a paranormal tours division where we can take people through like Pennhurst and Fort Mifflin and show them all the places where there's been reported ghost sightings over the years in Gettysburg. So that is very important that to not charge any kind of money because I try my best because we're setting up our equipment, but just depends if there's travel involved. Then we might have to charge just a little bit of money for donations and gas, which is completely normal. Depending on how far you got to go. If it's close by, we won't charge nothing.
So I always kind of found that traditional, we'll quote unquote traditional. Ghost hunting, if you will, is kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole.
Right.
You're trying really hard to kind of, use this sort of Hegelian idea of reality. We're going to take all of these big cosmological things, we're going to flatten them out into a two-dimensional space, and so we can understand it and quantify it. And I'm perplexed, and I wonder if you feel like that is the case. Do you feel as if you're doing all these things, you're like, yeah, we're getting results, but are the results good enough? And if that's the case, can they be better?
I would say results for us, at least so far, on every client, we have our client reviews. We got right now we got a Google business profile where we got 16 consecutive really good reviews on all of our investigations, but I think they could be better, meaning I think that we could do a better job of doing more review. I think that we could be doing a better job to prepare for the investigations. I think that spiritually we should be praying, and we should be certain things that we could do technique wise and where we can get better, which such as for example, we're ending a negative location, such as saying prayers, saying St. Michael the Archangel's prayer, the Lord's Prayer, try to help us, put sage over ourselves, depending on what the location is, make sure that, we get blessed by priests when we're doing these investigations. So there's always things that we can do to try to get better. The best thing that we can do is just try to learn from every investigation, try to learn where we can, maybe we didn't set up a particular piece of equipment in an area, maybe we didn't capture anything at all. So I think when you treat the spirits with respect, and instead of saying, hey, you did it to him, now do it to me, like Zach Baggins does on Ghost Adventures, that's the wrong way to do it. But when you actually treat the spirits with respect and you say, please and thank you for letting us come into your home and business, thank you for your time, you're going to get good results. And that's why we always end up capturing at least 2 or 3 different pieces of evidence on every investigation, because we always try to treat the spirit. Respect for the spirits is like respect for each other. So that's what we try to do. We try to go in with respect to every client, home business owner, and also to the spirit world as well. So when you do that, you're going to get good results most of the time.
I have this really interesting theory. Well, I say it's interesting. It could be incredibly boring for those who are listening, so I'm trying not to be conceited. That paranormal research, or the paranormal, quote unquote, in general, is the cosmology of the modern world, right? Our good modern ideas of how things work, and it's all of these things that are they're futuristic. You have aliens that are flying in from different planets. You have ghosts of dead people. You have Bigfoot. You have Mothman. You have all these things, and we're trying so hard to understand them. And the problem is that spirituality just doesn't fit into the modern world. And I'll point out an example for that. So anthropology, right? Everybody's kind of familiar with old school history. You open up a textbook, they're talking about early human history, and they're like, oh well, they discovered farms and they started agriculture, and oh by the way, there was religion, and they tack it on at the end like it's optional, right?
Right.
And I think that is garbage, because you have sites like Göbekli Tepe in the middle of nowhere, right? There's nothing going on. It's in the middle of a desert, but yet there were people that would come to this place, and obviously it had some sort of significance to it, right? So religion and spirituality matters. And I always find that with the paranormal, quote unquote, it's sort of this outlier, and it's sort of this like fun little thing that people are like, oh, that's interesting, and they don't discount it. Arguably people are more open to it now than they were years ago, but how we experience it is sort of this materialist version of ritual. We have our technology. We commune with the technological gods. Give us evidence, we say to the cameras and to the electronic voice phenomena, to our tape recorders, to our ghost boxes, and we get a thing. And whatever that thing is, we say, here it is. We found the afterlife. We found this other reality. And sometimes it's good enough, and sometimes it isn't. And at the end of the day, the problem is that it's still a two-dimensional reality. And you have to go to this place to experience it, rather than it being a portion of reality. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, like meaning like these people that are not open to it, they have to be able to go to these locations themselves and experience it, or they're not going to believe it. Like just like for example, think about the story, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, where in the Bible that he claims after he resurrected, people didn't. There's like more than 500 eyewitnesses of people seeing Jesus after his crucifixion. And these people would have been marked or crucified or tortured had they said something back in the days of, the Roman Empire. So it's that same analogy. Like if unless people have seen, for example, that boulder being pulled out of the rock that was removed from Jesus's tomb, and people, unless they physically see Jesus, spiritual body walking by and, being raised from the dead after 3 days of being crucified, people aren't going to believe it. Like, just like, for example, even if Jesus himself would have walked during that time when he resurrected right in front of all the religious leaders, they still wouldn't believe it was him. So how do you prove it? It's just, you got to actually physically be there to see it. So unless you don't, people say, well, these religious leaders, like Pontius Pilate, like when they believe that Jesus resurrected, they didn't want to do it. They didn't believe it. So they didn't see him. So how could they believe? You have to be there at that point. That's what you made a really good point there. Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's the thing. I don't think you need to go to these places because it's a part of reality already, right? You put down your car keys and then you turn around and they're gone and you're just like, it's one of those things. But it's not. It's a part of reality, and I think the problem with this is it's postmodernism, right? We throw out all the old ideas, and then we get to the wall that is nihilism. And you can only throw out so much before you realize, oh God, we're missing something. And so you turn back and you try to grab as much as you can and try to use that to kind of explain reality once again. But the problem is, you can only throw out so much.
Right.
Exactly. And so, in my personal opinion, the problem is how we experience reality as good modern people is very, very two-dimensional. And it's either all spiritual, it's all technology, or it's there's never the twain shall meet, and if they do meet, they'll just butt heads the whole time. And I think the problem is spiritualism was a reaction to scientific materialism. That's just what it is. And it's entirely intuitive, and it's versus all of the intellectual. And the problem is we need a balanced approach to it. And so with that being said, we're kind of coming up to the hour, but I'll leave you with this question. Do you find that you're getting a balanced approach?
I think technically, I would say that there are, were you really relying more on the technology, but also I want to try to have that spiritual side to it. So there has to be a way to counterbalance them both and kind of bring them together. And that's something that we're going to try to continue to improve upon as we get more experience and continue to get better at this, trying to, like you said, it kind of like taking those two bridges and connecting them and making sure like one side doesn't weigh over the other. That can be very difficult for a lot of people, for a lot of teams. But we're going to try to eventually bridge that gap in the near future as we continue to get better. So I definitely think that we can bring a balanced approach as we continue to improve and grow. So that's something that is going to have to take time. We're going to have to continue to work at, and that's the best we can do. Just continue to try to keep working at it, and not rely strictly on just the technology, but also we're trying to use that sea salt method. We're trying to keep it all streamlined and flat, so that both sides can try to connect and try to bring them together as one.
Well, I guess that's a. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad. You have something you want to say?
No, we're done. I had 100 more questions, but we're out of time. Thank you, Josh.
Hey, this was a wonderful time. Love the show, and anytime you want us to come back, just let us know. It would be awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Hey, stick with us for a little bit while we go through our announcements. So, if you're anywhere in or around or on top of New England, you can take a look at the Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend. That's September 2nd and 3rd. The event benefits local children's charities. Sadly, we have had to bow out this year because of my father's health, but please go and support the event if you can, and you can get more information at exeterufofestival.org. And we're kind of running out of time, so we'll get to the 2023 Western Connecticut UFO Conference presented by the Danbury Public Library. That will take place virtually and in person on October 22nd and 29th. And we'll begin the event with the show on October 22nd with a very special guest, Reverend Michael Carter of Ancient Aliens, and live audience interaction. And there's more information to come. And don't forget about the Greater New England UFO/Bigfoot Conference that is coming back, and this will be a one-day event on November 19th at the Veterans Memorial Center in Leominster, Massachusetts. You can watch for more information about that.
What do we got next week, Ben?
Well, August 27th, we'll talk about underwater ghosts and other high strangeness with Scottish researcher Malcolm Robinson.
We'll leave you today with a thought from American author Anthony J. D'Angelo. In your thirst for knowledge, be sure not to drown in all the information. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. We shall see you next time on...
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul